Podcast, where truth moves faster than a Holstein calf. No waiting on some pretty page. We're charting your ground in the digital age. Ahead of herd! Yeah! Where the future's more than just a word. Ahead of herd! Come on! The Bullvine's calling, let your voice be heard.
Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast, where we cut through the noise and deliver the truths that matter to dairy professionals. Today, we're tackling a silent crisis threatening the future of Holstein breeding. Inbreeding levels in elite bulls have tripled in a decade, from 5% to 15%, while the AI bull population has plummeted by 61%. But here's the kicker. Industry metrics like Expected Future Inbreeding, EFI, are masking the true genomic risks. Why should you care? Because unchecked, this genetic squeeze could slash lifetime profits by $3,700 per cow by 2030. We'll expose why stud consolidation, contract restrictions on top sires, and the modern type of high-pinned, shallow-bodied cows are red flags. But it's not all doom and gloom. We've got actionable solutions, from crossbreeding to demanding genomic inbreeding data from your genetic provider. Strap in. This episode is packed with industry-shaking truths and tools to future-proof your herd.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we don't just skim the surface. We plunge headfirst into the data that really matters to your dairy operation.
That's right.
And speaking of deep dives, have we maybe taken the gene pool a little too far down? Think about this. Over the last decade, inbreeding in our elite Holstein lines, it's tripled.
Tripled. Yep.
You heard that right, 3 times higher. It really makes you wonder, with all our focus on milk checks, genomic rankings, are we kind of painting ourselves into a genetic corner without even realizing it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that, frankly, should be keeping all of us in the industry up at night. We've been digging through the numbers here at the Bullvine, industry reports, stacks of genomic evaluations,
right?
The kind of stuff that can make your head spin, really. And for you listening, you seasoned dairy folks, we know you speak the language of genetics. But today, we're not just glancing at the metrics. We're diving deep into this storm brewing beneath the surface of Holstein inbreeding.
Absolutely. Our mission today is pretty laser focused. Let's really dissect this escalating inbreeding trend in Holsteins, using the facts and figures we actually have. What does this truly mean for the genetic decisions you're making right now on your farm? And what's the long-term outlook for the breed that pays the bills?
And it's a bit of an elephant in the parlor, you could say, because we've seen such incredible genetic leaps in Holsteins, especially in milk yield. Genomic selection has been a game changer, no doubt about it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's easy to get caught up celebrating those record-breaking production averages.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Bigger tanks, better components. That's kind of been the mantra for years, hasn't it?
It has.
But here's where things get, well, let's just say, a bit less celebratory. While we've been so fixated on those impressive gains, there's been this parallel and frankly pretty alarming surge in inbreeding. Right within the creme de la creme of the Holstein population. It feels a bit like winning the sprint, but then tripping right before the finish line of sustainability.
And it's not exactly front page news, is it? You might hear whispers about it, maybe at a conference, or see a footnote in some research paper.
Right.
But it's certainly not the headline screaming from the AI stud books you get in the mail. So it's completely understandable if it hasn't been a major point of discussion, around the kitchen table or in the barn office.
Which brings us to what we're kind of calling the inbreeding head scratcher.
Yeah.
Think back for a second. When was the last time you really scrutinized the inbreeding metrics on your sire summaries?
Yeah.
Most of us probably, you give a quick glance at the Expected Future Inbreeding, the EFI, right?
Yeah.
When you're sorting through those glossy catalogs, it's right there.
It is. And that's the go-to number for most producers, for sure.
Yeah.
But here's where the picture gets a little, fizzy. EFI, while it has its place, it just doesn't tell the whole story of what's actually happening at the DNA level. We're seeing this widening gap between the genomic inbreeding levels in Holstein bulls, which had climbed to a pretty worrying 15.2% by 2020. And at the same time, that dramatic 61% nosedive in the number of active AI sires.
61%?
Yeah, during that same period. That's a shrinking talent pool where, almost everyone's related. It's kind of a recipe for genetic stagnation, if you ask me.
It's sort of like comparing the nutritionist's perfect TMR formulation on paper to what the cows actually decide to pick and choose at the feed bunk, right? One is the ideal scenario. The other is the gritty reality of what's being consumed.
Exactly.
EFI is that projection, the relationship with some future heifers, but genomic inbreeding, or FROH, that shows us the actual percentage of an animal's genes where both copies are identical.
Right. It's a much more direct sort of no-nonsense measure of how closely related an animal is to itself, genetically speaking.
Okay, so FROH is the actual genetic closeness.
Precisely. EFI is essentially an estimate. How related is this bull to the average genetics of heifers born around, say, 2020? But genomic inbreeding, FROH, gets right down to the nitty-gritty of an individual's DNA. It reveals the proportion of their genome where both alleles at a specific spot are the same. And this distinction, it's absolutely critical when you're making those mating decisions that will shape your herd for years.
And here's a twist in the tale that's frankly a bit unsettling. The very benchmark we use to calculate EFI, the genetics of those heifers born around 2020, that benchmark itself is becoming more inbred.
Yeah, that's the kicker.
Between 2015 and 2020, the average EFI of the Holstein base population jumped from 7.5% up to 9.4%. So our measuring stick for inbreeding is itself getting shorter.
It's like trying to measure how high the water is rising in a bathtub that's already half full.
Right.
The numbers might not seem that dramatic until you realize the whole tub is just closer to overflowing.
Okay, so the baseline is shifting.
Exactly. It's like trying to gauge the depth of a lake when the lake bed itself is slowly rising. The numbers might look okay on the surface, but the underlying problem is actually getting deeper. Because that baseline population is more related now. A bull with a seemingly low EFI, well, he could still be quite closely connected to a significant chunk of the elite population.
Which totally deflates that common assumption, doesn't it? Hey, This bull has a low EFI, he must be a real outcross.
Not necessarily.
He might have a lower relationship to this increasingly inbred average, but still be, a cousin twice removed to half the other high-ranking sires out there.
Precisely.
So you could be using a bunch of these low EFI bulls thinking you're spreading the genetic risk, but in reality, you might just be doubling down on the same family tree without even realizing it. It gives you this false sense of security, this warm, fuzzy feeling of genetic diversity that just isn't actually there.
And what's fascinating, and maybe a little frustrating too, is the role that those contract limitations play, on the really hot new genomic foals.
Oh yeah, the exclusive ones.
Right. When the absolute top of the heap sires are only available through specific, often restrictive programs, their genetics get concentrated. They go into a select group of elite females first. Then, down the line, those same genes spread more widely, usually through their sons and grandsons. But by that point, the overall inbreeding level in that elite pool has likely ratcheted up another notch.
And the EFI.
Still anchored to that older, more inbred base population, it just doesn't fully capture the intensified homozygosity, those identical gene pairs that's been created by these initially limited but ultimately very influential sires.
Okay, let's put some hard numbers on the table then, really drive this home. Between 2010 and 2020, as we mentioned, the average genomic inbreeding, the FROH in Holstein bulls, skyrocketed from 5.7% to a whopping 15.2%.
15.2?
That's a staggering 168% increase in just one decade. It's like going from a mild family gathering to a full-blown family reunion where everyone's wearing matching DNA.
It's huge. And during that same 10-year stretch, the number of active AI bulls in service, it absolutely tanked, plummeted from a pretty robust 2,734 down to just 1,079. Think about that, a 61% shrinking of the genetic toolbox we're all relying on.
61% fewer options.
It's like trying to build a house with only a hammer and maybe a screwdriver and half the nails are bent.
And let's not forget that steady creep upwards in the EFI of the base population itself. That edged up from 7.5% to 9.4% during that same period.
Right.
That's a 25% rise in the baseline.
Right.
So you might be sitting there thinking, okay, genomic selection has been fantastic for my herd. I've got higher production, better udders. Isn't this just the inevitable trade-off for all that progress?
And it's a perfectly reasonable question to ask. Genomic selection has handed us incredible precision and speed in identifying those genetically superior animals. There's no argument there.
None at all.
But the unintended consequence, the sort of fly in the ointment, is that we're now increasingly selecting from a smaller and smaller circle of relatives. It's like trying to pick the tallest kid in the kindergarten class eventually. They're all going to be about the same height. We're running out of variation at the top.
Back in the good old days, pre-genomics really taking center stage, we'd see maybe over 1,000 newly pedigree selected bulls enter AI service each year.
Yeah, a lot more.
Today, we're lucky if we see 75 to 100 top genomic young bulls make the final cut.
It's a trickle compared to before.
And then you factor in that consolidation. 3 major U.S. cooperatives now controlling over 80% of the semen market. It's like we're all drawing water from the same increasingly shallow. Well, you got to wonder, right? What happens when that well starts to run dry?
And this didn't just happen by accident. It's not some random fluke of genetic fate. There are several key factors all kind of converging here, creating this perfect storm of a genetic bottleneck.
Okay, what's driving it?
Well, first, the sheer efficiency of genomic selection itself is a major contributor because we can so accurately pinpoint the genetic outliers for the traits we're chasing, milk yield, components, NMN, whatever it is.
Right.
We naturally gravitate towards the same dominant families again and again. It's almost like using the exact same filter on your DHIA sheets every month. You keep picking the same kind of cows.
Okay.
And as these closely related animals rise to the top of the rankings, guess what? They get used more extensively, concentrating their genes even further in the population.
Makes sense. What else?
But then you've got the whole drama of restricted access to the really elite genetics.
Right, the by contract only bulls.
Exactly. How often do you see a shiny, new, ultra-high net merit bull with all sorts of asterisks and fine print about who can actually use him? These aren't just clever marketing strategies. They fundamentally alter the flow of genes through the population.
How so?
Well, these exclusive sires often get bred primarily to other top-tier cows, right?
Oh.
Creating this sort of VIP genetic club.
Mm-hmm.
Their offspring only gradually filter down to commercial herds, and by then, as we talked about, inbreeding has likely intensified within that elite core. Think about it. When was the last time you had completely unrestricted access to the absolute tippy-top genomic sires in the industry?
Probably never.
Right. It creates separate streams, delaying and concentrating things.
Okay, so selection efficiency, restricted access.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
The consolidation of the AI industry itself is another significant piece of this puzzle. Cast your mind back maybe 20, 30 years. There were numerous fiercely independent AI organizations. Each had their own unique breeding philosophies, different bull lineups.
A variety.
Definitely more variety. Today, we have a much smaller number of major players, and often they're all making selection decisions based on very similar economic indexes, NM-MOR, TPI, JPI.
We're all chasing the same numbers.
Pretty much, which leads to a much more homogeneous set of genetic goals and, consequently, a more uniform selection of the bulls that meet those criteria. It's like everyone's trying to bake the exact same cake using the same limited set of ingredients.
Got it. And one more big one.
Yes, and we absolutely can't ignore the elephant in the room, the massive surge in beef on dairy breeding.
Huge numbers there.
Nearly 8 million units of beef semen used in dairy herds last year. That's a fact. And what it means is a significantly smaller proportion of dairy females are actually contributing to the next generation of purebred Holsteins.
Fewer replacements being made.
Exactly. This further shrinks the dairy gene pool, putting even more intense selection pressure on a smaller number of elite cows bred to those same few elite bulls. It's like deciding to only keep a handful of your very best heifers as replacements. The selection just becomes incredibly concentrated.
Okay, so we see how it's happening. But let's talk impact. This isn't just some, abstract discussion for geneticists.
Not at all.
This increasing level of inbreeding has very real, tangible consequences for the profitability and the day-to-day management of your dairy farm.
Absolutely. The data is pretty clear on this. As inbreeding levels climb, say from 10% up towards 20%, the economic hit escalates dramatically. We're talking about a potential jump in lifetime profit loss per cow from around $450 to upwards of $3,700.
Wow, that's a huge range.
It is. And that comes hand in hand with significant drops in things like milk production and fertility. Those are real dollars and cents coming right out of your bottom line.
Let's really break down those costs. For every single 1% tick upwards in inbreeding, what does that actually cost you?
Okay, so for each 1% increase, we're looking at a lifetime milk production decrease somewhere in the range of 177 to maybe 400 pounds.
Per 1%.
Per 1%. First lactation fat and protein yields, they take a hit of about 2 pounds each. Productive life gets trimmed by roughly 6 days.
6 days shorter life.
Calving intervals stretch out by, say, 0.2 to 0.3 days longer. And net merit takes a tumble of about $23 to $25.
Individually, those might sound small.
They might seem like small dents, yeah. But they compound over the entire lifespan of a cow. It's a lot like the insidious cumulative effects of subclinical ketosis or milk fever, small hits that add up big time.
Right, the death by 1,000 cuts scenario.
Exactly. Think about a cow with, say, 15% inbreeding, which unfortunately is becoming more and more common in some elite segments.
And 15% is high.
It is. Compared to a cow with just 5% inbreeding, that 15% cow could easily produce over 1,000, maybe 1,500 pounds less milk in her lifetime. Her calving intervals could be 5 to 8 days longer on average, and ultimately she could cost you anywhere from $1,000 to nearly $2,000 in lost profit over her productive years.
Those are numbers that should make any dairy farmer sit up and take notice. That's serious money.
Definitely.
And it's not just about the obvious stuff like milk and making babies, is it?
Yeah.
There's also this growing, although maybe not yet rock-solid proven, evidence linking increasing inbreeding to some less desirable shifts in linear type traits, the things we look at.
That's right. We're starting to see indications, maybe lower strength scores, shallower body depth, potentially higher pin placement in some of these more intensely inbred bloodlines. The research is ongoing, but the signals are there.
And what's particularly interesting is how these potential type changes might sort of intersect with the recent tweaks to our selection indexes, like the CDCB's net merit formula.
Right, the April 2025
Yeah,
update.
it put a greater emphasis on smaller stature cattle with more focus on dairy form, while actually penalizing larger stature.
Correct.
So we have to ask ourselves some tough questions here, don't we? Are we inadvertently selecting for a cow that looks fantastic on paper, meets all the index criteria, but maybe lacks the physical robustness, the strength to really thrive and hold up under the pressures of a modern dairy?
It's a valid concern. And what happens if we face a major disease outbreak, something new, something unexpected, that happens to target a specific genetic pathway that we've maybe inadvertently narrowed down through this intense selection?
Are we creating a super optimized herd for today's metrics, but one that's incredibly vulnerable to tomorrow's challenges?
That's the risk. Is this really the hardy, resilient dairy cow we envision for the future of our farms? Because that shrinking genetic base, it really limits our options if we suddenly need to make a significant course correction down the road. We lose that flexibility.
So if we don't change course, if we just keep going like this, where are we likely to end up? What do the projections look like?
Well, if current inbreeding trends persist at their present rate, which is somewhere between, say, 1/4 and almost 0.5% increase each year,
Okay.
we could realistically see the average genomic inbreeding, the FROH, in elite Holstein bulls soaring to between 18 and 22% by the year 2030.
18 to 22% average. That's less than 6 years away.
It's not science fiction. It's a projection based on current trends. And geneticists are sounding the alarm, warning that if the effective population size, basically, a measure of breeding diversity, dips below 50, we're entering a real danger zone in terms of the breed's long-term ability to adapt and thrive.
Like having a company with only a handful of key employees.
Exactly. If one or two get sick or leave, the whole operation is suddenly in trouble.
What are the specific downsides, the big risks of this intensifying genetic concentration?
Well, there's significant and multifaceted. We've already touched on the heightened risk of emerging recessive disorders. We've done a great job identifying and managing the known ones, right? HH1 through 6, CVM, BLAD. But as inbreeding continues its upward march, the probability of seeing new, currently unidentified harmful recessive genes expressing themselves just skyrockets because you're increasing the chance of getting two bad copies together. It's like playing genetic Russian roulette, and the chamber with the bullet keeps getting closer and closer.
Okay, so more hidden genetic problems potentially popping up. What else?
A constricted genetic foundation also means a diminished capacity for genetic resilience. The breed just becomes less equipped to adapt to new hurdles.
Like what?
Like a novel disease sweeping through the country, or shifts in climate affecting things like heat tolerance or feed availability, or even evolving consumer preferences that might demand different milk components or production systems down the line. Are we inadvertently pruning away the very genes that could be essential for the breed's survival and success in the years to come? Genes for things we don't even know we'll need yet.
And eventually, doesn't progress just slow down?
Eventually, yes. You run headfirst into the law of diminishing returns when it comes to genetic progress. There's a theoretical limit, sometimes called the genetic ceiling, where you've essentially squeezed out most of the available useful genetic variation for the traits you're selecting for. And further improvements become incredibly slow. maybe even impossible. It's a bit of a bitter irony, isn't it? That the very tools like genomics that have propelled our genetic gains so rapidly could ultimately become the handcuffs that limit future progress.
And the economic pain just keeps compounding as inbreeding goes up.
Oh, absolutely. We talked about the cost per 1%. If you look at cumulative levels at a 10% inbreeding level, maybe you're looking at $230 to $450 in lost lifetime profit per cow. Crank that up to 15%, and those potential losses jump to over $1,000, maybe nearly $1,900.
Okay.
And if we were to hit an average of 20% inbreeding, we could be staring down lifetime profit reductions of $2,300 to almost $3,800 per cow.
Per cow?
Per cow. These aren't abstract numbers. These are real dollars potentially disappearing from your farm's profitability year after year.
Okay, that's pretty sobering stuff. But here's the good news, right? And it's crucial that you listening understand this. Even with these concerning trends at the industry level,
Yes.
you, as an individual dairy producer, you are not powerless. There are concrete, practical steps you can start taking today, right now, to manage inbreeding within your own breeding program.
Absolutely. You can contribute to a more robust and sustainable future for the Holstein breed. You're not just a passenger on this genetic train. You can actually grab some of the controls.
Exactly. So we've put together a straightforward action checklist, 5 key things you can do right now to start getting a handle on inbreeding in your herd. Think of it as your genetic emergency brake, maybe.
Good analogy. Okay, what's number 1?
First and foremost, demand genomic inbreeding information. Specifically that FROH value we talked about. Get it from your genetic service providers. Don't just settle for the EFI anymore.
Right. Some of the more forward-thinking AI companies are already providing this, especially for bulls they market as outcross options. Ask for it. Knowing the actual homozygosity levels in potential matings gives you a much clearer, much more accurate picture of the inbreeding risk you're actually taking.
It's about seeing the whole iceberg, not just the tip. Okay, step number 2.
Seriously, consider implementing routine genomic audits of your replacement heifers. You're likely already doing genomic testing for selection purposes, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, make sure you're specifically looking at the inbreeding percentages that come back. And pay close attention to those runs of homozygosity, or ROH, particularly the ones that are longer than, say, 4 megabases.
Right, the long ones.
Because these longer stretches of identical DNA are strong indicators of more recent inbreeding, and that carries a higher risk of expressing those nasty hidden recessive genes. This helps you pinpoint inbreeding hotspots within your own herd in a way that just looking at pedigrees alone simply can't.
It's like moving from just looking at bulb tank SCC to doing individual cow cultures to find the actual source of the mastitis problem.
Perfect analogy. It's more precise.
Got it. Number 3 on the checklist.
Make it a firm rule, a policy for your farm. Set a maximum acceptable inbreeding increase for each generation in your herd.
What's a good target?
A good target to aim for is less than a 0.1% increase per mating, or per generation on average. And definitely take advantage of the sophisticated mating software that's readily available now.
Like SMS, Optimal Genetic Pathways.
Exactly. Programs like SMS, Optimal Genetic Pathways, Genetic Audit, these are powerful tools. They can help you balance your pursuit of genetic game, getting better cows, with effective inbreeding control. And don't forget about handy resources like MateCell or the CDCB's own inbreeding calculator. Use the tools. They can help identify matings that minimize inbreeding while still moving your herd forward genetically.
Okay, use the tech. Number 4.
Number 4 is to be strategic about incorporating true outcross sires into your breeding program. And I mean intentionally dedicating a significant portion of your matings, maybe 15 to 20%.
Okay.
To bulls that are genuinely genetically less related to your current herd, don't just assume low EFI means outcross. Dig deeper.
Maybe even look beyond Holstein.
Absolutely. Explore structured crossbreeding systems like Procross. That brings in Montbéliard and Viking Red genetics into the Holstein mix. The research consistently shows these systems not only maintain high levels of productivity, but also significantly boost fertility, reduce calving difficulties, and importantly here, completely eliminate inbreeding concerns in those crossbred offspring.
Think of it like diversifying your investment portfolio, maybe.
Exactly, or like diversifying your feed inventory. It's just a smart way to manage risk.
Okay. And the last one, number 5.
Finally, step number 5. Just be vigilant. Monitor the linear type traits within your herd for any subtle signs of declining robustness.
Pay attention to the cows themselves.
Right. While the direct link, as we said, is still being fully investigated, keep an eye out for trends. Things like decreasing strength scores or shallower body depth. These could be early indicators, sort of canaries in the coal mine, signaling increasing inbreeding pressure within your specific herd.
Okay, so that's 5 concrete actions individual producers can take. But individual action, as crucial as it is, it can only take us so far, right?
That's absolutely right. The entire dairy genetics industry really has a shared responsibility here. We need to confront this issue head on and work together towards broader solutions.
So what needs to happen at that industry level?
Well, for starters, organizations like the CDCB, the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding, they should really make it standard practice to report genomic inbreeding, that FROH value, right alongside the traditional EFI in all genetic evaluations.
More transparent.
Much more transparency. This would give you, the producer, a much more complete and accurate picture of the genetic relationships you're dealing with. They could even consider incorporating inbreeding taps directly into the selection indices, like NM-more, to actively disincentivize excessive homozygosity.
Make it part of the calculation.
Exactly. Greater transparency in these evaluations is just essential.
What about the AI studs?
We also need the AI studs to make genetic diversity a genuine priority, not just a footnote. They should really aim to maintain a significant portion of their bull catalogs, maybe that same 15 to 20% figure we mentioned for farms, with bulls that exhibit less than, say, 8% genomic inbreeding and demonstrate low kinship, low relationship to the current top 100 sires.
Ensure real outcrosses are available.
Right. Ensure that readily accessible, true outcross options are available to all breeders, not just those with the resources or connections to hunt down niche genetics. We need to start asking, why isn't this level of commitment to diversity already the norm? Why don't we demand this level of transparency and variety?
Good question. And the breed associations?
They have a vital role too, like Holstein Association USA. They need to provide clear, transparent reporting on the trends in genomic inbreeding, not just across the whole breed, but specifically within that elite breeding nucleus, where the next generation of AI sires actually originates.
Where the decisions really cascade from.
Precisely. This data needs to be publicly available, easy to understand, and regularly updated so that farmers can see the bigger picture and hold the industry accountable.
And research, where should that focus?
Universities and the USDA AGL need to step up and prioritize research that focuses on optimizing that balance, achieving rapid genetic gain while diligently preserving genetic diversity within the Holstein breed.
Finding the sweet spot.
Yes. This includes exploring the development of selection indices that explicitly place value on genetic uniqueness, maybe give points for being different, rather than solely focusing on short-term production traits. We need to start thinking about the long-term value of diversity, not just next year's milk check. The current focus often feels too short-sighted.
And finally, just getting the word out.
Absolutely. Education is paramount. Extension services, industry organizations, they need to proactively develop and deliver educational programs. Explain the implications of increasing inbreeding clearly to dairy farmers. Provide practical, actionable guidance on how to manage it effectively on their own farms. Honestly, many producers may simply not be fully aware of the extent to which inbreeding has increased or the potential long-term consequences for their operations. We need to raise awareness.
Okay, so the undeniable bottom line here is this. The Holstein breed really stands at a critical genetic crossroads, a crucial point. We've achieved remarkable strides in productivity, fantastic gains, but there's a very real risk that we've been borrowing against the future, genetically speaking, to finance those gains in the present.
Well said.
This narrowing genetic base, which is starkly evident in those soaring inbreeding coefficients and that shrinking pool of active sires, it genuinely threatens the long-term sustainability and adaptability of the breed that underpins so much of our industry.
And as one prominent dairy geneticist put it, in rather stark terms, we're mining genetic capital at a rate that far outstrips our efforts to replenish it.
Wow.
And he added, the inevitable bill will come due in the form of calves born with recessive genetic defects we can't even identify yet.
That's a really sobering thought to chew on, isn't it?
It really is. And this is the empowering part. You, our listeners, you have the power to influence this trajectory.
You do.
Both through the individual breeding choices you make on your own farms, day in and day out, and by actively advocating. Asking for greater transparency, demanding a stronger commitment to genetic diversity from the organizations that are supposed to serve our industry.
Remember, the historical success of the Holstein breed wasn't just about milk. It was built on its remarkable adaptability. And that adaptability is fundamentally dependent on maintaining sufficient genetic variation for whatever the future may hold. We need that toolbox full. So let's leave you with a crucial question. to really ponder as you make those next breeding decisions. Are you solely focused on maximizing production in the very next lactation? Or are you truly breeding for the long-term health, the resilience, the profitability of the next generation of your herd?
It's kind of like that feed ration analogy again, isn't it? Carefully balancing for optimal immediate milk yield versus ensuring the long-term health, fertility, and longevity of your cows. Your genetic strategy needs that long-term horizon. It has to extend far beyond just the immediate results showing up on the next milk test.
And the answer to that question, how you balance those two things, that will ultimately determine the future success of your farm and contribute to the future of the Holstein breed as a whole.
The time for decisive action really is now.
Start by digging deeper. Find out the actual inbreeding levels within your herd. Get that FROH data. Challenge your genetic providers to offer you bulls with verified low genomic inbreeding, true outcrosses. Implement those strategic mating strategies we talked about, the ones that actively work to manage homozygosity.
And perhaps most importantly, get actively involved in the broader industry conversation. Talk about the critical importance of genetic diversity at industry conferences, at breed association meetings, in your regular discussions with your AI representatives. Make your voice heard.
Ask yourself, what is the single most impactful change you will make in your next genetic selection decision as a direct result of this discussion today? How will you consciously balance your breeding program's immediate economic needs with the absolute imperative of long-term genetic sustainability for this shared resource, the Holstein breed? What's the one concrete step you'll take?
Because the moment for this vital conversation isn't somewhere down the road. It's right now, while we still have sufficient genetic diversity to actively preserve. We can't afford to wait.
So to bring it all together, what we've uncovered today is a significant and maybe often overlooked trend. This silent but accelerating genetic squeeze happening within the Holstein breed. Inbreeding levels are climbing at a rate that far outpaces what traditional metrics like EFI alone might suggest.
And this poses potentially serious long-term risks to your farm's profitability, yes, but also to the overall resilience of the breed we all depend on.
And the key takeaway, if there's one thing to remember, it's crystal clear. Genomic inbreeding, that FROH number, it provides you with a much more accurate, much more insightful picture of the genetic relatedness you're dealing with than EFI alone. It really demands your closer attention when you're making those critical breeding decisions.
And your role as a dairy producer is absolutely pivotal in this. By demanding greater transparency from the industry and by actively implementing proactive breeding strategies on your own farm, you have the power. You can help steer the future of the Holstein breed toward a path of greater long-term sustainability and resilience.
So, as we all continue to strive for those ever-increasing production averages, which we need to do, let's leave you with this final, perhaps slightly unsettling thought to really chew on until next time. In our relentless pursuit of peak performance in the next lactation, are we inadvertently sacrificing the very bedrock of genetic diversity that underpins the long-term resilience and adaptability of this magnificent Holstein breed?
Or maybe put another way, in our focused quest for the perfect genomic animal, the one that tops all the charts, have we inadvertently overlooked the inherent and maybe irreplaceable value of genetic variation itself? Which in the end might just be the ultimate insurance policy for the future of our herds and our entire industry.
Something to really sink your teeth into. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
If this episode lit a fire under you, share it with every dairy professional you know. The Holstein breed is at a genetic crossroads, and silence isn't an option. Visit thebullvine.com for the full article, charts, and our 5-step inbreeding survival checklist. Subscribe to our daily e-zine, 30,000 farmers already trust us to separate hype from hard facts. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bullvine Podcast. Remember, genetic progress shouldn't mean painting your herd into a corner. Breed smart, demand transparency, and keep fighting for dairy's future. Until next time, stay utterly relentless.
Ahead of the herd. Ahead of herd. Where the future's more than just a word.